The one with Ross's Inappropriate song is the 7th episode of the 9th season of Friends. This is directed by Gary Halvorson, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And as is usually the case with Friends, I will talk about each part of the narrative in turn. So I'll talk about Phoebe and Mike first, and then Joey and Chandler, and then Ross and Rachel. Phoebe is finally meeting Mike's parents. This is Theodore and Bitsy, played by Gregory, Itzin, and Christine Rose. And they're definitely from a different world than Phoebe. They are much more wealthy, arguably better educated, maybe not as open-minded or as kind and caring. And Phoebe tries her best. She dresses very not like Phoebe, and she speaks not like Phoebe. Mike encourages her to just be herself, which makes sense. He wants his parents to like Phoebe for Phoebe. And she does. She lets her guard down, but kind of made the mistake of telling them everything, basically, about her life. I'm exaggerating, but she went into a lot of detail that shocked them. Credit to his parents at this point. They weren't responding in a way that made them seem horrified, but I still think it was clear that they weren't necessarily Phoebe's biggest fan. And it is awkward and uncomfortable, but it's funny as well. We do get some comedy in here. She punches Mike's father, rather, and just the way he responded I thought was quite amusing. And then she tells his mother that Mike is a very gentle lover. And the thing I found the most funny about this is that Mike didn't respond with a lot of emotion. And I don't think that's because he didn't care or that he wasn't feeling uncomfortable. I think it's because he kind of expected it, and there's just not a lot of emotion on his face. And I thought that worked so well. It was so funny. It was almost as if I could hear him internally sighing. It was very, very well done. And then Phoebe ends up telling them about Smelly Cat, and then they serve veal. And I feel like that's the first real mistake his parents made. They tried up until that point to not show that they were horrified by what they were hearing, but Mike had told them that Phoebe was vegetarian. And the fact that they ignored that, maybe there was a miscommunication, but that was the turning point. That was a genuine mistake, a genuine display that they weren't that bothered. That being said, they weren't that bothered about making sure they served her something vegetarian before they met her. So imagine how unbothered they'd be about caring for her needs now that they've met her. And it really shows that maybe they're not actually that concerned about anybody but themselves. And Mike, of course. And Phoebe tries the veal and she ends up throwing up. And when she's out of the room, Mike gives this great speech to his parents about how they don't need to love her. They just need to accept that he loves her. And he refers to her as the woman I love. And Phoebe hears this, and it's established that that's the first time Mike has ever said that. And I think it's fair to say it's not the first time either of them would want to say it to each other, but they do. They say they love each other, and it does seem very quick. It wasn't that many episodes ago that they met, but at the same time, they do seem to get along really well. So from the outside, it does seem quick, but it just seems right. It feels right for Phoebe and Mike, and I thought it was a beautiful moment. And Phoebe manages to end the scene with some comedy about throwing up in the coat closet, so I feel like the power was back in Mike and Phoebe's hands, and I thought ending on that funny note was the right decision. So a big day for Phoebe and Mike, and I rather enjoyed their part of the narrative. Then we come to Joey and Chandler. Joey is thinking of buying Richard's apartment. So they go over to Richard's apartment. Richard isn't there. And while they're there are a bunch of videotapes, and one of them has Monica's name on it, and they deduce that this must be a sex tape. Chandler is annoyed that Richard has a sex tape of his wife. Fair enough. So he does what I feel like, I was going to say what anybody would do. I would have, if they're in the apartment, I feel like maybe they could have just played it there, rather than stealing the tape. Of the two, I think that one would be more excusable. Because if anybody walked in, it would be easier to explain than I stole your property. I don't know, I'm maybe overthinking it. Either way, Chandler took the tape, maybe in a panic, and he makes Joey watch it. because he obviously doesn't want to see it. And it's just football. It's just football. And then it stops being football. It does cut to the sex tape. And that's when Monica walks in and recognises Richard on the screen. Chandler and Joey are on the floor at this point, and Joey pulls Monica down, and obviously they're trying to explain what happened, and they happen to mention her cowboy boots. And Monica points out that she'd never worn cowboy boots before. And she puts the tape on, and it's not her. And her biggest concern is that Richard taped over their tape, which I suppose that has to sting, but at the same time, it's good news that he doesn't have a sex tape of Monica now. I feel like he probably should have written over her name or scribbled out her name or Tipp-X'd it or something, because how are you going to keep track of what's on your tapes if you don't label them properly? But I guess all's well that ends well. Now they have to find a way to return the tape. Not really sure. Again, I feel like it would have been better if they just played the VHS while they were there. Yes, one could argue they shouldn't be fiddling with the TV and VHS that were there, but also they shouldn't be stealing somebody's sex tape, because that feels like more of a crime. I don't know if it is, but either way, I guess all's well that ends well. And it's a pretty decent part of the narrative. And then we come to Ross and Rachel and baby Emma. And Ross is singing Baby Got Back, and she giggles, she laughs for the first time, and Ross is delighted by this. And I have to say, this was my introduction to the song. In fact, for many years, this was the only version, Ross and Rachel singing it, of Baby Got Back that I had ever heard. Because obviously I was watching this early 2000s before we had music on demand so much. And yeah, this was my introduction to the song and my only reference for the song for a very long time. He tells Rachel about it. Rachel is not happy that he sang such an inappropriate song to Emma. And she tries to make her laugh in other ways, and it's not working. So she sings the song, and Emma laughs. And all of that is entertaining enough. I don't necessarily think it's the funniest. I wasn't that bothered about it. I did like the singing, but my favourite is the scene. There are two reasons why I love the scene at the end. Well, I guess three reasons. One, it's just generally entertaining. Two, it's nice to see Ross and Rachel having fun together as they're both singing this song. They're really getting into it. I was going to say dancing, but mostly Rachel's just spanking Ross, and they're really having a good time together, making Emma laugh. So that's the second reason why I love it. The third reason is that the others appear in the doorway of Ross's apartment as they're doing this, which in itself is very funny. But the main reason I love this is that it's the others, including Mike. We have Monica, Chandler, Joey, Phoebe, and Mike, the seventh friend. And I love that. It's kind of the first time we see Mike as one of the group, and I thought it was a really, really lovely moment, and it was beautiful, and I guess it's a catchy song. I haven't really ever listened to it before, but I have certainly heard, I guess, the original version. But Ross and Rachel's version at the end is definitely my favourite, and ultimately not a bad part of the episode. I think it's fair to say that, all things considered, the one with Ross's inappropriate song is a pretty great episode of Friends. Personal highlights: that final scene, for the various reasons mentioned, just absolutely love it. Mike being part of that group there was a great decision. And Mike saying that he loves Phoebe, beautiful. Absolutely loved it. And Richard's apartment was nice. Very busy apartment. There's a lot going on in that. It's quite a small space, but there's a lot going on. It's an interesting place. And yeah, I liked it. The one with Ross's inappropriate song will always be a pretty delightful episode of Friends.